everybody had a great Christmas and New Year's. And talking to everybody kind of says the same thing. It was quiet, but a good time to rest and recharge our batteries. So we are going to start off uh, talking about choices, and we also have a new format. It's going to be shorter, more condensed, more focused, and more digestible. And so I hope you like it. So today we're going to start off, as I said, we're going to talk about choices. Seems like a good thing to start our New Year's off with. And first, what's important to understand about choices is that everything is a choice. Everything. You always have options. And I think a lot of times we get trapped in our thinking of, well, we don't have a choice. And there's always choices. Some we might not like, some might be harder than others, but we always have a choice. And I think foundationally, we're more empowered if we understand that. We're more empowered as individuals if we understand that we have a choice and that everything is a choice, and a choice about how we think. So I think that's one of the core things about understanding how we move through life, how we move through processes, how we ended up where we are today. Everything has been just a series of choices, and along the way, those choices are really good learning opportunities. So when we talk about everything being a choice, now we always have choices. We have the opportunity to reflect. I found this quote over the weekend that I really liked, that everything in your life is a reflection of a choice that you've made. If you want a different result, make a different choice. I think it's very appropriate for the topic of how we make our choices, and being able to, how do we process things, and how do we process our choices, and we'll get into how do we make those, how do we retrospectively look at things so that we can make different choices along the way. But if we want to make optimal choices, we have to be able to understand that wherever we are today is based on a series of choices that we've made, and we have to look at them non-judgmentally, and that is really critical. We have to be non-judgmental about our choices and understand that we got where we are because we made certain choices based on the information we had at the time. We didn't have any other information. And so everything that we have and every place we are is based on the choices that we've made. Now that we have the information about our past choices, now we can make different choices if we want different outcomes. So what impacts our choices? And I think this is one of the really kind of fun and exciting exercises that we can all personally go through. So what impacts our choices? Well, past experiences impact our choices. So, right, we have an experience where we did something and maybe it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. So we're always going to make choices to stay away from that thing that was uncomfortable, or stay away from uncomfortable things in general. Social conditioning. So a lot about how we were brought up, our peer groups, what's acceptable within our peer groups. Now, peer groups could be personal, it can be at work, it can be subgroups, right? So it's about our social conditioning, how we were educated, all those types of things impact our choices. Patterns and habits and cycles. Now, we've talked a lot in the past about patterns, habits, and cycles, but patterns, habits, and cycles also impact our choices, because if we're used to doing one thing, or we're used to doing things a certain way, or we're used to thinking a certain way, okay, we will then make choices that loop into those patterns, habits, and cycles. And so being able to understand that and be able to deviate from that pattern, cycle, or habit is what's going to allow us to make different choices. And then I think lastly is self-limiting beliefs. Self-limiting beliefs impact our choices. So let's talk about that for a second. Now there are some self-limiting beliefs that are okay. So if I'm skiing and I'm kind of a novice, and I look at an expert trail and I'm like, nah, I don't think that's a very good choice. Okay, well so there's a difference between challenging yourself and pushing yourself, and then being ridiculous about it. And so my skiing example is is that a self-limiting belief? Well, that's probably more of a safety thing, right? Where if I'm not an expert skier, I probably shouldn't go down the expert skiing path. Okay. Now that's kind of common sense. But there's other self-limiting beliefs. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Now, when we say those things or we think those things, they show up in our choices. So if, for instance, we choose to turn down maybe a job opportunity, or a project, or the opportunity to go travel, or pick anything like that, and we choose not to do it because of our self-limiting beliefs. Okay, well that's a choice then that brings us back into following into a pattern, habit, or a cycle. And so the other thing about it is, if we keep having the same outcome all the time, where we're not getting the best outcome, we're not getting the optimal results, we have to start asking questions about, well, why is that, and what choices am I making that are leading me down the same path. The path might look slightly different every time, but I always end up kind of in the same place. And so self-limiting beliefs, self-limiting beliefs are really powerful, because we will make unconscious decisions and choices because of our self-limiting beliefs. So if I don't believe that I'm good enough for X, I'm going to make choices that are always going to be beneath whatever X is. And I'm always going to have choices that are going to have a trajectory that are going to land me below X. All right. Now, if I believe that I can do X and that I'm worthy of X, then I'm going to make choices that are going to have a trajectory that are going to be above X. Okay. Now, you might not get there the first try. You might not get there the fifth try, right? It might take a while to get there, but it's the intent and the arc of your decision and your choices that you make, okay, which will land you in a different outcome. And so I think it's important, as we're making choices, and maybe we're making choices that this wasn't the outcome I was really looking for, that we take a step back. We say, okay, well, what is impacting our choices? What impacted me to make that choice? Is it because it's what I know, it's what I'm familiar with? Is it because, well, that's how I was brought up? I was brought up a Democrat, so I always vote Democratic. Or, I was brought up in a household where that money was hard to find, or money was hard to come by. So I look at money as being hard to come by, or success, or health, whatever it is. They do these surveys, they do these studies, which I think is really fascinating. Is they'll take people who are adopted into a family, and let's say you were adopted into a family that had high cases of cancer. All right, even though you come from an entirely different gene pool, okay, because you're in an environment where it's accepted that a lot of us in this family have cancer. Well, you know what? Even though that might not be true to your gene profile, okay, you'll end up more often than not falling into the group that you're with. Now, a lot of that gets down to our mind, our thinking affects our chemistry, but then it also gets into habits. So if we're in an environment where maybe we're not eating as healthy, or whatever the case may be, then that we fall into the habits, right, that will create the expectations that we're in. And so choices, that's a lot has to do with choices, where we really, and it's a discipline, it's almost an art, where you can take a step back and say, okay, look, I keep getting this outcome, or I keep having this experience, and being able to look back on our past experiences and say, okay, well, my past experience leads me to this past experience, or this cluster of past experiences is leading me to make these choices. And how do I make different choices? And it's pretty fascinating because you can get a choice loop, right? And it only takes one change in your choices, one decision point, to be able to change that pattern. So understanding what impacts our choices is super important. And then to wrap up here as we get towards the last couple of slides. So there's the wishful truth, and there's the actual truth. Now you have to ask yourself, what is the truth behind my decision? Am I making a choice because I don't believe I can do this? Or am I making a choice because I don't feel that I'm worthy? Or am I making a choice because, you know what, I don't really have the skill set for this yet, so it's probably not wise for me to adventure too far outside of my limits. Although pushing my limits a little bit's okay, getting into my stretch zone is okay. But this might be beyond that, so I'm not going to do that. So what's the truth behind the decisions you're making? And so I break it down two different ways. There's the wishful truth, which is what we would like to believe, and then there's the actual truth, which is what is actually happening. And you have to understand the difference between the two, because we can convince ourselves, we internally are really good salespeople, okay? We can convince ourselves of the wishful truth very quickly, all right? Almost instantaneously. But where we get into a healthier state is when we understand what the actual truth is. And then we know what real freedom is. And I like this. And I like this concept of true freedom is knowing from where you make your choices from, so that you can make different ones. You can't make different ones unless you know from where your original choices are coming from. So that's really true freedom. True freedom is understanding that I know why I've made this decision. I know why I've made this choice. I know why I've made that choice in the past, and I'm not going to make it again. Okay. I'm not going to beat myself up over it either, by the way, because I learned a lot from it, whatever it might be. And that's true freedom. And there's a feeling that comes with that that's really almost irreplaceable when you get to that point where you can really kind of understand. And you might go back to a decision that you made 30 years ago or 20 years ago. It doesn't have to be a decision you made last week, right? It could be a long time ago that set into motion certain cycles of decisions. And then even if you broke from them, even understanding the moment where you broke, okay? So that freedom is very, very powerful, and it's liberating because it gives you that base to be able to make optimal decisions from. So we have a couple chats here real quick. Yeah, Ali Carter is talking about Joe Dispenza's choice clip. Yeah. Joe Dispenza is great. He's got amazing information. We'll talk about that here in the end. So how do we make better choices? So reflecting on your choices over time and their results is the best way to evaluate and adjust for better future outcomes. So being able to objectively look back, okay, and understand that, well, I made this choice, and this choice led to these outcomes. These outcomes were, maybe some were okay, maybe some weren't. I want to make different ones in the future. So when given the opportunity to make this choice again, how will I act? What will I do? What was the basis of making that choice? All right, remember, that's where we just talked about. That's where the freedom comes in. The freedom is understanding, why did I make that choice? Why do I feel the way I feel? And that's where you have to get away from the wishful truth and get into the actual truth. And I kind of believe there's really nothing more painful than operating in the wishful truth zone, okay? Because that's kind of fairy tale land. It's maybe the way you like it to be, but it ain't the way it is. And what you really want is you want to know, well, where am I right now? Like, what is the actual truth and why am I making these choices? And if you're able to do that, and it's a skill. It's no different than exercise. It's no different than learning a foreign language. It's no different than learning how to cook. It requires muscle memory, and it requires discipline, and you have to do it frequently enough where you're building that synaptic connection. And I just was reading this article this weekend, and roughly it's 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, a month, to be able to develop a habit. It's really not that long, right? Most of us are going to live to be 80, 90 years old. But I think we can spare 4 weeks to be able to develop a good habit. And so you want to be able to work that into your thinking all the time. What's the actual truth versus the wishful truth? How have I made this choice? Why am I making this decision? I've made this decision before. It hasn't worked out very well. Maybe I should be more curious as to why. And I think this is a good exercise to start the year off with. And once we have it, it's like riding a bike, right? Once you learn how to ride a bike, you never learn the skill. Once you get good at this, you'll always be asking those questions. So let's see how we're doing here for any more chats. So yeah, so Ali brought up Joe Dispenza, and he's really great. He's one of my favorites. Very insightful chiropractor, and turned into being really heavily involved in the sciences around brain chemistry, and why we do the way we do, meditation studies. So he's kind of a hard science guy, and then kind of really turned into really trying to understand what are the more subtle ways our bodies work and how energy works and what we identify with. He's got some great books. If you just you can YouTube him, which is what I kind of recommend. I do a lot of audiobooks just because I drive and a lot when I'm at the gym and all that. But you can YouTube him, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and you can watch some of his YouTubes, and then you can decide if you want to pick up any of his works. So that's it for today. It was really good to see everybody. Happy New Year, and let's make great choices.